My name is Steve Krashen, and this is what I think. I think there's no problem, no serious problem in education today. You keep reading in all the newspapers and on television, everyone agrees that American education is in trouble. Schools have declined. I don't think so. We can always get better in education. And nearly every professional educator, teachers, researchers, administrators are, contrary to popular opinion, working hard at improvement. We all do this all the time. But there's no big, massive problem that people are complaining about. Teachers are just as good as they've always been. Students are just as serious as they've always been. And parents are just as responsible as they've always been. There is a problem, but it's not the one you hear about. The problem is poverty, and that is the major problem in American education. Here's why I think this is true. If we look at research on poverty, the effects of poverty on children's learning and behavior is enormous. Children who don't get the right nutrition, children who don't get enough to eat, have problems learning, behaving in school. The good thing, if you can say the good thing, about hunger problems is that when we start giving the children good food, everything does improve. We have problems with environmental toxins, lead poisoning being the most serious probably. Lead is a permanent source of damage for children. It interferes with the neurotransmitters and it's there forever. Children have medical problems. David Berliner and others have pointed out that families of poverty either aren't covered by medical insurance or they have a very high deductible. School nurses are rare in high poverty schools. Children of poverty have practically no access to books. Their schools have inferior or underfunded school libraries. There are fewer books in the classroom. They live in neighborhoods with fewer bookstores. Public library services aren't as good, and they have fewer books at home. In addition to all these individual factors, we also have some very compelling research that shows that when you control for poverty, our international test scores are just fine. The big driving force behind educational reform today, and this was mentioned at the very beginning of the Waiting for Superman movie, is the fact that our middle school children don't do especially well in international tests of science and math, like 23rd out of 30, something like this. If you control for poverty, that disappears. Researchers Payne and Biddle did a very interesting study a few years ago. They looked at children from middle-class families who went to well-funded schools. Their test scores were among the top in the world. The reason our test scores aren't spectacular is that we have so many kids in poverty. The United States has a huge percentage of children in poverty compared to other countries that take these tests. We have anywhere from 20 to 25% of our children in poverty. Compare that to Denmark and Sweden, where it's between 2 and 3%. That's why the scores are down. The problem is poverty. What this analysis means is there's nothing seriously wrong with our teachers, nothing wrong with the parents, nothing wrong with the students. The problem is poverty. If this is true, the way out of it is very simple. Until we solve the problem of poverty for everyone, until we have full employment with everyone making a reasonable wage for a good day's work, we need to protect children against the effects of poverty in school. This means better school nutrition. No child left unfed, as my colleague Susan Yohanian puts it. It means continue free and reduced price lunch, breakfast, etc. It means better medical care. It means all children covered by medical care. It means more school nurses, and of course, more improved school libraries, more funding for school librarians, library services, as well as public libraries. I'm going to say this does not require a great deal of money. It's a fraction of what we intend to spend now on the preferred government solutions from the Arne Duncan administration. What they have been planning, and I don't know if people know this, you have to read between the lines in the news and look at the documents from the Department of Education. We are going to spend billions and billions on the most ambitious, rigorous testing program ever seen on this planet. Most people are aware that No Child Left Behind brought in far too many tests. Most people are aware that No Child Left Behind, which incidentally did not show any success on any evaluation, forced children to take more tests than they've ever tested before. It turned schools into test prep factories. What Duncan is planning now, and this is all in his blueprint for education and in other documents, is far, far worse. No Child Left Behind tested children between grades 3 and 8 once a year and once in high school. Well, the new plan is to continue this and possibly extend it to other grades. No Child Left Behind tested children in English and reading. Now we're going to continue this, but schools are also encouraged to test other subjects as well, and many of the professional organizations in science, social studies are insisting we want to be included too in order to get stimulus money. So we're going to see tests in many, many other areas besides reading and math. Under No Child Left Behind, we have testing at the end of the year. If we want value-added measures, comparing pre-test and post-test, and you want to control for the effects of summer, Diane Ravitch has pointed out we might very well wind up with tests in the fall and tests in the spring, which doubles testing right there. Not only that, the current reformers have hijacked the term formative testing and are now going to have tests through the school year regularly. All these tests are going to be on computer and closely linked to the new standards. Secretary Duncan has said he wants to be able to go up to a child and be able to tell that child where he or she is on the scope and sequence at any specific time. In fact, they've talked about monthly testing. One document even talked about daily testing, if you can imagine that. So we're about to turn school into a testing nightmare. Far more tests than we've ever done before. Billions and billions are going to be spent there. Money that could be spent protecting children from poverty. Can look at it this way. The current federal budget for No Child Left Behind, which is now up for renewal, is $26 billion a year. If you took 2 years of that, maybe even 1 year, invested it at 2% interest, this would generate enough money. This is a one-time investment, only once, and it lasts forever. This would generate through the interest enough money to make sure that every child in high poverty areas has plenty of books, has access to a good school library. If we do this, if we focus on solving the problem, not just trying to measure it more, if we do this, if every child has the advantages that middle-class children have, if every child is protected against poverty, our international test scores will be at the top of the world. Do teachers count? Of course they do. Absolutely. But there's a limit to what a teacher can do when faced with children who have had malnutrition, not enough food, environmental toxins, poor medical care, no access to reading outside of school. There's a limit. We have to first take care of these basic problems, and that might be enough to solve the problem.